And we are live. What's going on YouTube Live? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Tuesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Tuesday, you should know what it is time for. It's time for a first row intersation. Tonight's topic is the perceived threat with my guest. This is your third time. Wow, your third time on Intersations. Kristin Griffin. Can you say hello to the people, please, Kristin?
Hi, everybody. How are you doing?
I hope they're doing fine whenever they reply to you. And if they're watching via the replay, hopefully they leave a comment and say that they're doing fine. Thank you for coming on tonight, Kristin. I'm really appreciative of you coming on tonight. Actually, first and foremost, before we even jump in too deep into the topic, I want to actually say who recommended this topic. Ta-da! Kristin has recommended this topic from California. This is a topic that actually is close to her heart, and it's actually close to my heart as well, especially having 3 sons that are minority children. It's a topic that is close to me. So the perceived threat, we're going to get into this topic tonight. This is the last month that you guys are going to get this on what an intersation is. So for those who are new to the intersation concept, let me share what an intersation is very briefly. Intersation is simply when you take interview and conversation and you merge the two together, you get intersation. So in my life, I'm very, very fortunate to have a robust network of people that I interact with, from friends, strangers, coworkers, family, children, nieces, nephews, and uncles, and anything in between. I interact with these people, and we have our conversations from time to time that typically go beyond the surface, from, how are you doing? How have you been? How are the kids? To much more deep and meaningful conversation. Well, that stuff's meaningful too, but this is more deep and meaningful when it comes to growth conversations that drive questions like, well, what does that mean to you? Why do you think that way? Where do you think that originates from? Those types of questions. And so in those conversations, there's an abundance of growth that takes place, whether it's reflective growth, combined or collaborative growth, or individual growth. There's a lot of growth that takes place in those conversations. So what I decided to do, based on the recommendation of a friend by the name of JC, is to start bringing those conversations into the light. And so what Intersations is me literally opening up a lens into those conversations so that you can experience the growth, you can contribute to the conversation, and we can experience the growth from your addition to the conversation. So though tonight you will see visually myself and Kristin going back and forth on the video camera, realize that this is a very interactive environment. If you have a question that you want to ask, feel free to drop it into the chat. We'll bring it into the conversation. If you have a nugget that you want to share, or if you're interacting with somebody who's in the chat, do that, because this is like group conversation where we're all able to share our experiences, share our insights, and hopefully come up with the best solution that works for us as individuals. So that may be a piece of this, a piece of that, a little dash of salt, a little dash of pepper, add some cayenne, bam, you got a meal. So that is what Intersations is. I'm really looking forward to tonight's topic. There's a lot of things that are going on presently in just the news over the past week that can easily be brought into this conversation. So we might dabble a little bit on the news and some of the current events that are taking place. With that being said, let's jump into this intersation. Kristin, you already know how it goes. We're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the people, and then we're getting to business. Go ahead. Could you tell people hello once again and introduce yourself? And a little bit, especially since this is your topic that you recommended for the first row, could you share a little bit about why this topic was something that really rang true or rang significantly within you?
Well, first off, my name is Kristin Griffin. I am a mother of 3. I actually have 2 boys and 1 girl. This topic pretty much hit home just because I'm raising a young man. I'm raising 2 young men. And with everything that's been going on within our society, I've had to have real conversations with them. Things I didn't think I really would have to have with them. And it's just to see their experiences and how they have to deal with it and how they talk to me about it, and our conversations that I have with them. I was like, hey, I would like to talk to other people about this. What do other people feel about it as well?
I think that's really good to number one, I appreciate your transparency in just saying, hey, this is something that I'm concerned about. This is something that is on my radar. And having those conversations is definitely something that, as when you first become a parent, you're just like, oh, the baby, the baby, the baby. However, there comes a point where the baby, the baby, the baby. No, there's a different societal view that takes place. Even if that is your baby, it's not the world's baby. And so really having to manage and guide those perspectives externally to the best of your ability, but also guide those expectations internally with your children. I think that's really important. So with that, thank you again for being on tonight. Let's jump into tonight's topic. As with every Intersation, I like to start with the exact same question. What does the topic, the perceived threat, mean to you?
Well, the topic means like, that's how my child is perceived to the world. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily who they are. That's how they're perceived. So it's a perception. So that's what it means to me.
Okay.
It's defying that perception that the world has placed on them.
Okay. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper because because that's what I do. But from the perspective of that perception, and when you take the word perceived and you add a word that's, in my particular opinion, the word threat is not a positive word, it's a negative word. When you take the perceived threat, if you were to break down that word, like, perception is not always reality, perception is not always truth. However, when there's a negative connotation with it, the perceived threat itself, or that perceived negativity, can be a real danger to the person who perceives it, if I'm the one who perceives the threat, and it can be a real danger to the person who is being perceived as the threat. So could you dig a little deeper on that particular, especially having two sons and a daughter, on that particular portion of being a perceived threat, and how maybe you may see your children versus how the world is seeing your children?
I see my oldest, first and foremost, my oldest is one of the goofiest kids. He's always doing pranks, always joking around. He's always smiling, laughing. He's just a prankster. And so other people might take that, like, I know, like, he had a perfect example for me today. I was talking to him about this topic in general, because I was like, I would love for you to come and give your point of view. And he's like, Mom, I'm not ready for that. But we were talking about, he loves to skateboard. We live in a suburban area. There's a lot of Caucasian children. It's becoming more diverse, but we're in a suburban neighborhood, and there's not a lot of minorities around us. So he goes to the park and he skateboards. He was skateboarding the other day. They were at the tennis courts, and the gentleman asked him to, like, can you guys please skateboard somewhere else? His friend, Caucasian male, was like giving a little attitude. He automatically knew he couldn't do that. He didn't want it to be a confrontation automatically. So he wanted to diffuse it and was just like, no problem, sir, we'll move automatically. But his first reaction was, I don't want to move. Like, whatever, man, I'm just going to do this. But he knew deep down that he couldn't do that because of how it would be perceived. Like, he knows that he has to control how he reacts to certain situations, as opposed to his counterparts.
Yes, this is definitely a truth.
And it's just like, it's the sad part is that that's his reality, that he can't just express himself like his friend feels like, oh, I can say whatever I want because I'm entitled. He knows that he's not entitled. Off the bat, he knows that he cannot come off that way, or else he's going to be perceived as this angry African-American boy who's just trying to start trouble.
Right. Troublemakers. That
the keyword troublemaker. He came from a single parent household.
Troublemaker,
backstory.
Thug, and criminal. Troublemaker, thug, criminal. Like, those are like the only three options. It can't be like, I'm just a kid who wants to skateboard here, and this is a shared environment in which I can choose to skateboard in. Right.
Like, automatically.
Right. So, okay. So that explains or expands upon it a little bit more for me. And that's, for me, that's where I'm kind of at with this topic. The perceived threat for me is that how people perceive me. Like I can, for instance, for myself personally, I can be out and about in sweats and a t-shirt, or I can be out in basketball shorts and a hoop shirt or a t-shirt or whatever, and I'm perceived differently versus when I'm out in my business attire, or I'm out in a polo, or I'm out, networking or whatever it may be. I'll be perceived differently, and that perception is funny because for me, regardless of what I'm wearing, I'm me. Regardless of how I'm speaking, I'm still me. Like the core character that makes up Billy Rowe is Billy Rowe. However, for the people who are seeing me, it's like being back in my old neighborhood. I'll get out of the car and be grabbing a bite to eat. Somebody sees me walking up and they're like, oh, he's black. He's in this neighborhood. He must smoke weed. Hey, you want to buy some weed? I don't smoke weed. That's not something that I choose to do. So because that's something that I don't choose to do, that doesn't change for the person who perceives me to be that person. I've even had people ask if they buy weed from me, and I'm like, where are we getting all this assumption that I'm just connected in the drug game? Like,
want a sandwich,
right? I could get you. You need me to pick some weeds because I don't have any drugs on me. For me, it's just not worth the risk of being a distributor and going to prison and getting shot at or getting robbed. All that stuff is just not of value to me. So for me, my character says I just don't do drugs. I don't really interact with it. And every once in a while I drink alcohol, but I have tons of alcohol at my house and hardly ever drink it. So for me, that perceived threat is really the perception, and I'll go one step forward further. The story that people begin to write about me or my children or people who look like me simply because what they assume to be the stereotype that we fit into. So for me, that's what the perceived threat is really that story that says that I'm dangerous, that says that I'm hostile, that says I'm the angry black man, that says all these things about me before I even get a chance to open my mouth, that says I'm not going to be compliant, that says I'm going to, yell at the cops and be disrespectful and try to run, like says I'm going to do all these things. However, I'm not even given the first step of presenting who I am. And that perception, that perceived threat, really, it doesn't, because it's a false threat, it doesn't jeopardize them. They feel like they're threatened and they feel jeopardized. But because really their perception of me is I'm a threat, it really puts me in danger, and it jeopardizes my livelihood, not just from earning a financial living, but jeopardizing my livelihood as far as my actual life. So that's what this topic means to me. I'm really glad that you recommended it because it's a very important topic that I think needs to be discussed. And hopefully we come up with some solutions tonight for those who are in the live chat and for ourselves that we can continue to reiterate and build upon for our children. So that's what it means to me. So with that was your easiest question. I hope you're ready to get down to business.
Are they ever easy though? That's the question.
They are. That was the easiest one. I mean, at least you know what it's going to be. That's the easiest question. So for my next question that I have for you tonight, when it comes to this perception or this perceived threat, what have you said you've had to have certain conversations with your children that you never thought you would have to have. What have you taught your children about society's perception or how society has perceived or perceives them?
I basically told them that they have to, be a little bit nicer in certain situations. They have to make sure that they know their surroundings. Pay attention to their surroundings first and foremost. If they feel like there's a group of their friends that they need to kind of disperse and kind of break apart just a little bit, because when they're in a group of more than 3 or 5 people, automatically they're a gang. They need to be split apart. I just know that from when I was in school, when we had a group of more than 3 minorities together, they would automatically make us go in different directions. So that was the first thing I told my kids. If you're in a group with all your friends, make sure you have a diverse group of friends with you and not just one type of race, unfortunately, because that's how they're going to view you. For instance, my son went to school in a neighborhood that's known for white supremacy. And I told him he was walking with 2 young females and he was the only male. Very dangerous situation to put yourself in. You may think it is innocent, but if one of them yells, "Hey, rape," or "Oh, he's bothering me," guess who's getting in trouble? You are. You could just be joking with them and they're like, "Oh, he's bugging me." And they're like, "Oh, is he bothering you, ma'am? Do you need us to get," like, automatically that situation can turn. So just having him be aware of who he puts himself around, what type of friends he has. You may have a friend that gets angry easily. Try not to hang out with them and go out with them in public. When you're in a store, behave. Don't touch everything. Make sure your hands are visible to the camera so they know where they are. Don't put your hands in your pockets so much. Just understand that when you do walk by certain people, they're going to view you differently. And, you know who you are, so that's okay. Just be yourself regardless, but understand you are viewed in a different light. Just like little keynotes that I would have with them.
Now, so those are things with your son, but what about you? You have the fortunate, you're fortunate to have sons and a daughter. What about with your daughter? Do you have the similar conversations with her, or are you having different types of conversations?
I have a different conversation with her because I don't want her to be perceived as the angry little black girl. My daughter is very intelligent. She's very intuitive. She can express herself very intelligently, and she can tend to be kind of like condescending. So, because she's like giving her point, but she's like, "Don't you know?"
Right?
So like,
don't you understand that you didn't come to that conclusion on your own? You need me,
yeah.
like, really?
Yeah. So, I just try to I give her those like little keynotes. Like, you don't want to be perceived as like the angry little know-it-all little black girl who thinks that she can do everything. Even though you can do anything that you want to do, tone it down just a little bit. You can be strong and assertive in a more positive way. Just with things like that. Or don't I mean, she's enhanced in certain areas. So you don't want them to think that you're this type of person or that type of female, even though you're completely not that type of person. It's just, those are the conversations I have with her, how she's perceived as well. Like, yes, you may have come from a certain household, but that has nothing to do with who you are. Like, just because that situation is not you. It's the situation. Like, those types of things are not.
Situation does not make for your identity.
Has nothing to do with it. You are your own person. And most of my children are perceived as like very toned down or nerdy, which I love. Like, I love that about them. I don't care because their mother's a nerd and quirky and goofy. But just if I see certain outfits, I'm like, okay, you might not want to wear that one out.
Right.
Just little things like that. So I still talk to my kids about like the outfit choices that they have, or if I feel like if it represents something that I know is not them, and I know that when they walk out, they're going to be looked at differently. I want them to be able to express themselves and be themselves, but still understand that there's certain things that they might not be able to get away with.
Right. Well, I mean, that's like,
or a certain hat, like,
right.
Like, it does. Like, I never want my boys to sag ever. Like, they're not saggers whatsoever. But yet my son wears a hoodie everywhere he goes.
Yes.
Even in the summertime, like right now, a hoodie. I'm like, dude, especially with like, well, we all know famous Trayvon Martin. That freaked me out. I was like, no more hoodies. Like, none whatsoever. Or just yes, sir, yes, ma'am. That's all you want to say. It's just little conversations, little keynote pieces that I would have with them.
Right. And it's funny.
To both of them, actually.
To all of them. Yeah.
All of them.
It's funny because from the perspective of like wanting your child to be able to have their identity and express themselves and show who they are. It would be no different than like when we were growing up in the 80s and the 90s when Bloods and Crips were like really banging in the streets. And right, you just got to know, like, if you're going to be out and you really like blue and that's your favorite color, then don't be in blue in a Blood neighborhood. And if you really like red and that's your favorite color, don't be in a Crip neighborhood. And it was weird to have that dynamic because on one hand, it's like, well, I should be able to wear whatever color I want to be. And that doesn't mean I'm a part of the gang. But again, that perception begins to paint a target. And, you know, to some extent, yes, being an individual, expressing yourself, I think that is important. However, I also think being able to make it home safely without having to get into unnecessary confrontation, that is also important. I think it's funny that you said your son wears a hoodie, because my son wears a hoodie all the time. It's like the same hoodie. I guess it's his favorite hoodie. I don't know. But I was telling him, I was like, you know, in the summertime, you're walking around in 80, 88 degree weather with a hoodie on. To me, as an outsider, I'm your father. I know who you are. But as a person who doesn't know you, I'm like, what is this person hiding from? Because it's way too hot to have a hoodie on, and it's way too hot to have a hoodie on and the hood up. So
exactly.
So,
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, I understand that.
I don't.
But how do you balance though the okay, I want to keep you safe, maybe you shouldn't wear that? How do you balance that, which really does in not in like necessarily the most major ways begin to suppress who they are? How do you balance that suppression but also allow that freedom to have that self-expression?
I just have real conversations with them. I bring up different scenarios, like when things are happening in the news or just around us. I try to give them little key examples and let them kind of reevaluate, is it something they really want to do? I'm going to tell them no at first. And then they're going to, of course, give me, why, Mom? Why are you always saying, no, I can't do this, I can't do that? Well, this is a reason. How do you feel about it now? Okay, Mom, I kind of see your point. I'll tone it down just a little bit. So I'm very fortunate because we do have those conversations and we have really real conversations about it. I don't sugarcoat things with my kids, unfortunately, because I want them to understand like the severity. I've made my kids sit down and watch Roots. I've made my kids sit down and watch certain shows with me so that I'm like, see, this is what could happen. I know it may seem extreme, but these are true stories. Like,
right.
Incidences that have happened. Fruitvale Station, I'm like, he was just getting on the freaking train. Like, dude, like you have to understand little things can change in a moment, and how you walk out or how you react can cause certain things. Like my little one, he has a temperament that you say something, why? He gets very defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I'm working with him on that at home, because I know once he steps out that door, if he does it to somebody else, he's an angry little black boy. Always got to pop off for no apparent reason. He's angry. He has a chip on his shoulder. I don't want that for him.
Right.
You know, so it's like, unfortunately, he's known as the happy little kid, which I'm like, he ain't like that at home. But how did you get that kid and not me? But it's just, I just have real conversations with them. I try to like, maybe I've embedded in them a little too much. But I just want them to understand the reality. Yes, be who you are. I love who you are. You're a great person. But if you react that way, this is how you're going to be looked at.
Right.
And it's how are you going to be able to accept that reaction that the other people have upon you?
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because my middle son, he is, all my children are pretty like sharp-witted children, but he's the slick talker, and he'll say condescending things thinking he's slick. And I've constantly reminded him, like, one day you're going to say that to somebody who doesn't care about whether you're conscious or unconscious, and you're going to find yourself in a fight. Like, so why don't you stop saying the things that are slick because you think they're funny and you think they're cute, and start having more meaningful conversation? I mean, obviously he's about to be 12 years old, so he's not going to have like the most in-depth philosophical conversation. However, I'm like, you know, if you get in a fight, I understand why it happens. It happens because you're allowing this to talk you right into that situation, instead of saying, you know what? I mean, I have a friend who called me this week. I'm sorry. No, last week, because it's Tuesday. And he was like, you know what? We gotta go back to what we used to say in like 2015. Our motto for 2015 was, we cannot say the first thing that comes to our mind, because it's something that cuts deep. It's something that incites people to want to fight. It's something that's going to incite somebody to want to get beat up, because I'm not just going to take no L. It incites people to certain things. And so understanding that and trying to communicate that to my son is like, you know, the first thing, it may sound cool, it may sound funny, but you can't always rock with the first thing that comes to your mind. Take some time, process it before you let it leave your lips. So I definitely understand that. Let's move on to the next question, because I kind of have a path that I want to take in this conversation. Not that I'm leading your answers, but I want to lead where the conversation goes. The next question that I have for you is, in your opinion, where do you think today's society is basing their perception of minority children? Where do you think they're getting their information? What analysis are they doing to come to their conclusion that there is an actual threat, or that they perceive there to be a threat?
The stupidest things. I know I shouldn't say the stupidest things, but I think a lot of it has to do with, like, when we were growing up, the music, they always pointed to the culture. The music, the movies, I think the movies that they've been putting out are very positive, and they don't show us in that light. And I feel like people have been doing a great job in portraying us in a better light when it comes to film. Mm-hmm. But there's still that stereotype out there when we're being chosen for certain roles, or they're trying to portray certain stories. Like, I know when they do Africa, they always do the men, they put them in they're the most violent men. The African men are violent. So automatically you're going to think, oh, African-American male, he's violent. He's not a peacekeeper. He's going to be a threat to my family. You know what I mean? They're putting, it's media, entertainment that's putting it out there. And then majority of the news, usually when you see things on the news, they're giving you like the worst stories from the worst neighborhoods. Like, why do we always have to hear about Camden, New Jersey? Like, why? Like, things like that. Like, why are we talking about Chicago? Yes, it's a huge death rate in Chicago, but what else is taking place in Chicago? You know what I mean? They're always focusing on those negative stories, which puts us in this different light. And that's all they're showing the media. They're not showing, oh, this person has done this. This person is doing this. We're the first African-American to do this. We're the first minority to do this. They're not doing that. We see it more and more now. Like, I feel like they're starting to become a balance. But, you know, when we were growing up, like, they had the Rodney King trial. And what did they show?
Right.
Minorities tearing apart their own neighborhood.
They showed riots in the Rodney King incident. They showed riots more than they showed Rodney King getting beat up.
Exactly.
Which was crazy to me. It's like, wait a minute. You understand?
People mad. Like, why people are mad.
Right. It's like when my son, he was younger, I had CPS come to my house when he was younger, and they were there, and I was just like, I don't even understand why they're here. And so, like, they came to my house, we took care of that particular CPS case, and then they came back to my house. And when we were talking on the second case, same school, but second case, I'm like, I don't know why you guys are continue to be called out here. And so the lady had a conversation with my son and was like, okay, so what's going on? And she was like, well, you know, I had talked to a teacher I can trust and confided in, and I told her that my dad is a ticking time bomb. And I was like, okay. And so I'm like, oh, I'm a ticking time bomb? Like, help me understand this. He's like, well, you know, sometimes when I do things, you get really mad at me. I said, okay, so when you're talking to this teacher, did you ever tell her like the type of things that you've done that would cause me to be upset? Because yeah, I can get upset, and trust me, I can go over the top with the best of them. But when you just tell somebody that I'm a ticking time bomb, it makes it seem like I am the deviant. I am the one who is waiting, you know, like maybe I'm like an alcoholic coming home drunk and I'm just beating you up because I don't got anything better to do. But when you take that Rodney King incident and you say, okay, somebody was beat by the same people who are supposed to protect and serve him. Somebody was beat, and the person looks like me. And not only does the person look like me, this is something that has happened multiple times before we got to video evidence.
Exactly.
So when we erupt, now I'm not a fan, I don't riot. I'm not a fan of tearing up your own neighborhood. I'm not a fan of tearing up businesses. But when you riot, you can't say, oh, look at these animals. They're tearing up everything, as if nothing happened or nothing provoked them like that. Like everybody woke up one day and decided to flash mob and riot. Like, so from that perspective, for me, I always look at like there's cause, there's effect, and I get we should be more in more control of our own reactions to things, but I think that's just a lack of planning, a lack of understanding on how to actually approach things in the system in which we have to play. So
and I'm sorry. We've done a better job at doing that as well, like with the whole movement, like Black Lives Matter movement. I think that they took a positive approach, just like they did back in the day when they marched, when Martin Luther King marched. Like, they took a different approach, and yet they're still ridiculed. They're still being looked at as angry. But yes, we do have a right to be angry. We're voicing ourselves peacefully, but you still want to cause a confrontation. Why? Because you don't agree with us, or you just don't see it.
Right. And I will tell people, I remember one of the CPS agents or workers or whatever, I don't know what the title is, but one of the people from CPS was like, "Oh, it shows here you went to anger management. So do you still get angry?" And I looked at her like, "Yeah, I still get angry. Like, it's management. It's not abolishment. It's not gonna like, oh, I no longer have an anger emotion. If that's the case, please believe I'm investing a big nuclear explosion of anger that's going to come out one day." They were like, "Oh, he was still angry this whole time." Yes. So it's funny because people try to invalidate, in my opinion, people try to invalidate the emotion of anger. Anger is a legitimate emotion. It is what you do when you're angry that becomes the problem, but it's okay to be angry. Like, it's okay to be frustrated. With my oldest son, I've gotten to the place where I'm like, look, if I got to cuss at you while I'm talking to you, then it's not time to talk to you because I'm still too pissed off to talk to you. So I definitely get that.
I need my space.
Yeah, I need some breathing room for a minute. So I like, though, that you say entertainment and media is really what's driving. So I guess what my question to you would be is, how do we remove people, or how do we help guide people out of those two, in my opinion, those two lazy research devices? Like, the news and social media are not really reliable sources when it comes to doing research. And truly, if you want to classify somebody or group somebody in a particular category, those are not necessarily the places you should be going to do your research. So how do you guide people out of that and try to steer them towards more effective interactions? One of the things that, like you said, was that you encourage your children to have diverse groups of friends versus just, oh, well, all I know is Black. And so since all I know is Black, or all I know is Mexican, these are all the people that I know. So all we do is complain about the people that we don't know, even though we don't really know about them. How do you guide
them? Well, from our other Intersations, as you know, my family is very diverse. So that's all I've ever really known. But growing up, I've noticed certain things that my siblings have gone into. Like different like scenarios that they've had themselves. Like my older brother, he was actually at a party with friends. We've always had diverse groups of friends. He went to this party. He was the only African American there. His friends were there. He was not wanted. He was beat up. You know what I mean? So even though he was beat up and targeted by race alone, he still had no hard feelings towards these people. Yes, he was angry. He was hurt. But he still kept being around his friends. He kept going to these parties because he knew that that's just that one person's perception of me. They don't know me. They're the ones who have the issue. It's not me. So seeing those situations with my own family members and seeing how some of my family members have been treated, that's when I started having these conversations with my kids to make sure that you branch out, get to know other people, understand why people are a certain way. Once you actually get to know someone, you'll understand their culture, and you won't have any reason to be like, oh, that's just only so-and-so does that, or make fun of those things. Be able to have conversations with them, understand what's going on. I've always been really big on reading about things I don't understand so I can understand and have a better conversation with someone. Yeah, I may not agree with you, but now I can understand why maybe you do it, but it's not something I will do. So just teaching my kids different ways to cope and handle different situations. I probably missed some of the topics, but
that's
how I kind of lead them into it. Like, hey, try this, try that. Because if you don't try, you never know. Maybe see why they feel that way. Maybe if you talk to your friends and you're around their families, they'll be like, oh, you're showing an example. Be the example. Like, I know there's this quote, like, be the change you wish to see. Like, you might want to change the world. You want the world to change. But in order to change the world, you have to change yourself.
Right.
So
you can't continue to be you, but want the world to change so that you can go and change with them. No.
Yeah, you have to be that. You have to be that force that causes the change. Show them what a good example is. Show them this is not how you see an African American male, you see a minority female, you see a Mexican or Asian woman. This is not just because that's what they show. That's not how we are. We have a lot of similarities that we don't even realize. You'll know that just by having a conversation and sitting down with people. Their stories are similar. It's just they try to separate us.
Right. They try to separate by color when really you have similarities outside. Obviously, color may not be a similarity, but you have tons of other similarities.
Exactly. You're so like, oh my gosh, we're like twins, but we're different shades. Like it's it's to be the example. That's what I try to teach my children. Be the example. Be the change you wish to see.
Okay. I want to bring in some things that Brian said. My cousin Brian says perceptions are systematic. Showing black men rioting was an attempt to justify Rodney King's beating. He's one of them. He deserved it. This is also done when unarmed black men are killed. Police justify it by digging into and releasing their criminal activity. Social media deepens the conditioning. Absolutely. That is one of the things that I've always noticed. It's like, okay, when anybody dies, there's typically an obituary that you can find on the person. And even the people that I know are not the most savory characters. I'm going to put it in a nice way, are not the most savory characters. Their obituaries are not like, oh, he was a bad apple. He just had it coming. You know, she was out there in these streets. She had it coming. Nobody's putting that in the obituary. It's like leaves behind this person, you know, we'll miss this smile or we'll miss this good memory. However, it seems part of that perceived threat comes when in hindsight, you see, oh, well, you know, they were out causing mischief anyway. So we're going to bring in something that you and I talked about that I told you I wanted to get through before we got to this Intersation. And we'll probably have another segment later on the first row on this, but when they see us on Netflix, there was...
Where's my tissues? I think I need tissues.
There was so much in that mini 4-episode series that like I know you said you did it one episode at a time, but I did like 2 episodes and I wanted to see what else was going to happen. And I had time to see what else was going to happen. But also I was like, I need a break. Like
draining.
Like, yeah, I'm emotionally tapped. And this is something that happened when I was a child. So when they see us, obviously in the future, a decade and some change later, they're vindicated. But during the time you hear, oh, they're animals. They were out doing this. They were looking for mischief to get into, almost to paint this picture of this perceived picture that the society already sees them this way. All we got to do is play into what society sees them as. So for you, if you could share a little bit of the concerns that I guess I'm going to call it a documentary for lack of better terms, but that documentary shed light on in regards to you and your children, when your children might be in the wrong place, but not necessarily doing the wrong things. And being in a park does not necessarily dictate the wrong place. Maybe the time of night they were in the park dictates the wrong place, but back then I was out until the street lights came on and then I had to be in the house. So can you share a little bit about how that documentary plays into this particular conversation, the perceived threat, when it comes to your children and your concerns for them?
what's crazy is we had talked about this before we even knew the movie was coming out. Right. So it's like perfect timing. Like we had already decided it was going to be in June, not knowing that it was going to be right after the movie. So I feel like a lot of people had this topic in mind. For me, I made sure my kids sat down and watched it because it just ties into all the conversations I've had with them. And it was hard to see them watch it. My little one was angry. He was frustrated. And I had to console him because he's like, why did they treat him like this? Why? He's just a kid, or he didn't do anything wrong. And I'm like, exactly. These are all the things I tried to tell you. It may seem extreme, but this is what can happen. Not all scenarios, but being in the wrong place, being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Just, you could be anywhere. It doesn't matter. Just be hanging with your friends and something happens. You're going to be the first person that they look at. It could have been the other person in the corner who's like, looks the most innocent, but guess who they're going to look at? They're going to look at you.
Right.
First thing's missing. You're at your friend's house. First thing's missing. Who are they going to ask? They're going to ask you. Just be prepared, because that's what's going to happen. And you're going to get defensive. You're going to get angry. It allowed me to have a different type of conversation with them, because I've always told them to be honest when it comes to police interaction. That's a conversation that I've had with my children. Like, when you do see a police officer, yes, sir, no, sir, answer as much as you can. Don't catch an attitude. Make sure your hands are visible. If they want to reach in the pocket, ask them to reach in your pocket for you. Don't you automatically reach. No, I don't have nothing. No, let them check first. Let them check. Make sure your hands are visible. I think there was a video of a man. They were saying that he kind of saved his life because the police officer had a gun pointing at his face. I was basically telling him, open the door or do something. He's like, no, officer, my hands are up. You can open the door, because the gun's right in his face. Like, I don't want you to give a reason to shoot me. Like,
right.
And he was very direct on why he didn't want to move his hands. And he's like, see, my hands are here. And, that could have saved his life. Imagine if he would have reached down into his pocket. Automatically, what are you reaching for? I felt threatened. Boom, you're done. Like, watching that with my kids, it kind of gave a little bit more of a reality to all the conversations that I had with them. Just because it's weird, because when they see things on the news, they think automatically, that's not me. That can't happen to me.
Right.
Like, Mom, that's just that situation over there. That will never happen. But when they see it actually happening, like the actual incidences that took place, in order for that person to be in a situation they are, it brought up a whole nother light for them. Like, wow, like an aha moment. Like, this is what my mom's talking about. This is what she means when she says that. She wants us to feel protected. It may be wrong. Yes, what they're doing is not right. But I do have to be a little bit more conscientious of the things I say, the things I do, how I respond. I need to be a little bit more not on the defensive, but a little bit more on the compliance. You could be as compliant as you want to be, and things can still happen. But I need to, they know that if they are questioned with the police and they're, my mom needs to be here, or I need a representative. They already know not to admit to anything if they have not done it.
Right.
I don't want them to say nothing.
Right. Go ahead. Let them know you have a phone call to make.
I need to speak to my mama.
I cannot talk to you till my dad gets here. I cannot talk to you till my mom gets here.
No, I will not. Like, so I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to speak to people I do not know.
Right. Even if they have a name badge on.
My kids feel, it's like they're supposed to feel protected. They're supposed to honestly feel protected. And I do have friends and family who are law enforcement. You know what I mean? Like, I have friends and family that are law enforcement. I think, what's that one movie that was out not too long ago too? About the boy who grabbed the hairbrush or whatever, and they thought it was a gun. I forget the name of them. I can't even think of the movie.
I didn't see the movie.
It was a book as well. It was really good. I had my kids watch that one. But it was just those types of things are like, oh wow, I need to be able to have these conversations, be real with them about it.
Because here's the thing, and this is one of the double plays for me, or the double entendres on the perceived threat. It's almost like that chicken and egg syndrome. When I know you perceive me as a threat, I now perceive you as a threat because I know you're scared of me. And even though you're not rightfully scared of me, I have no harm or any ill will. I want you to get home safely, and I want me to get home safely. I don't even want to have to choose who's going to try to get home safely, because if you're armed and I'm not, that's a pretty bad situation for me. I'm probably not going to be the one who makes it home safely. So when I was watching that documentary, there were a couple of things, like it all came down. Oh, The Hate You Give, my cousin said.
That's the one.
I have to watch that. I haven't seen that yet.
Read the book. It's amazing.
I have to. Matter of fact, I'm gonna write that down right now. The Hate. But when I was watching it, I was trying to explain to my oldest son, because he lives here with me in Utah. Like, all of this is happening based on choices that law enforcement are making, choices that the children are making, whether it's choices to be out and chill and have a good time with your friends when maybe you should head home, whether it's admitting something that you didn't do because you want to go home. All these are choices that are taking place. And as these choices are taking place, realize, just like Brian said earlier, they're going to look at your history to try to validate the choices that they're making. And so with my oldest son, last quarter, in his last quarter of school, he was skipping his history class. And I was like, I don't know if you think that I'm like not smart or something, but I know that if you miss a class 13 times, there ain't 13 legitimate excuses for why you would miss a class. And so now he's paying the consequences of some of that. And he's like, oh man, I could have passed that class. Yeah, had you been there, you would have passed the class, but you chose to be truant. And I'm not going to go and back up your truancy and say, oh, this is excused for this and this is excused for that. So in that, when they see us, when he was sitting on the stand, and it was like, oh, well, you weren't even at school that day, and you weren't at school that month. I said, do you not think that they're not going to be able to see your attendance records? You think that I'm just making up, oh, it's important for you to be at school? Because I always say it's important for you to be where you're supposed to be at. Because when you're not there, if an emergency happens and I need to come looking for you, you're not at where you need to be. If something happens while you're not at where you're supposed to be at, then I don't know to go looking for you there until somebody says there's a John Doe, or there's somebody in the hospital and he goes to this particular school, and I need to come up there and see if it's my kid. So I really looked at the choices that were being made and how each choice kind of impacted or influenced each other. It was like, I choose to see you as a threat, and I choose for you to be the suspects because I don't want to lose or not convict somebody on this case. And so now you're the suspect, and it's like, well, I choose that I want to go home. So sure, I'll be your suspect because you're telling me I can go home. That's another aspect of the perception, where it's not a threat, but the understanding that just because somebody's in law enforcement doesn't mean they can't lie to you.
Exactly.
Like, we're taught, oh, they're there to protect us. They're there for these reasons and all this great stuff. However, teaching our children that, hey, they can lie to you. They can say such and such said that you did it, and such said that, you were over there, and such said all these things, and they ain't even talked to such and such yet. Mm-hmm. So because of that, for me, when it came to watching that documentary, it really hit home to the importance of the choices that we make. And the title was just genius. When They See Us. It's like, when they see us
too.
What'd you say?
She changed the title on purpose because she wanted it to have a different impact.
Well, that was a genius title, because when they see us, there's a perception that takes place. And if that perception is in place contrary or before meeting you, then unfortunately you're at the mercy of whatever experiences and or non-experiences that they've had up to that point. So I just wanted to sidebar into that really quick. We'll go back into the Intersation. We're almost at 50 minutes. I didn't know that was going so fast. So let me ask you yet another question. In your opinion, what risks come into play for our children when they are seen under the perception of negative lenses, of a negative lens rather than a neutral lens? Like, given the opportunity to show who they are, and then somebody making a decision about who they are. When they are just immediately seen as that thug or immediately seen as that fast little girl, when they're seen as these negative characteristics or negative characters, what are some of the consequences or the risks that come from that?
It puts them in a dangerous situation. It puts them in a threatening position themselves. Like, they become vulnerable. I think the vulnerability can cause fear, can cause anger. It can cause that emotion that they want to get out of them because they feel that they're treated unfairly, and it just makes it heightens the danger for them, and it makes it unfair.
I think that's something that you just touched on, that it makes them feel like they're being treated unfairly. And I think it's natural. It's a natural human instinct to want to defend yourself or defend your position when you feel like you're not being treated fairly, when you feel like the odds are stacked against you, even though you didn't put any effort into stacking those odds against you. Going back to you saying your sons don't sag, your sons are not saggers, they don't do that. My oldest son probably would sag if I would let him, but I'm like, yeah, you need to put a belt on. If those pants don't fit and you don't have a belt, then you need to get rid of those pants. Because just the concept of when you're sagging, you're constantly pulling your pants up. And so you might be in an interaction with law enforcement. You might be in an interaction with just an everyday person. And if it's confrontational and you go to pull your pants up, they're just like, hey, they're reaching for something. Yeah. Right. Like, they're reaching for something. I actually have to be cautious about how I wear my phone, because I wear my phone with my clip on the outside of my pants and my phone inside my pocket so it doesn't fall off. Well, I was thinking about it as I was walking to the car today, because I'm, thinking about our conversation we're going to have. And I'm like, wow, if I was just like grabbing my phone to make sure I could record a situation that was happening, somebody might perceive that phone as a concealed weapon. And if they have a concealed weapon, they're definitely going to be faster to draw than I am going to be faster to draw my concealed non-weapon. So it's very interesting, like, how those risks come into play when that perception sits there. I mean, I'm grown. I know how to communicate very well. I know how to de-escalate a situation. I know how to escalate a situation. However, just having to have those things constantly with you, I feel like it creates a secondary pressure, almost like when you step out of your house, there's a barometric pressure, I think is the word, to tell you, what the pressure is in the atmosphere, if it's going to rain, all that great stuff. I feel like there's this pressure that when you step out of the house and when you begin to interact within society, it's like, I'm under pressure to not be what you already think I am, even though I've given you no reason to think that that's who I am.
Yeah. Automatically defensive. I like what Brian said. Insecure, shame, hurt, disempowered. That's a huge one. They are disempowered. That leads with vulnerability.
Angry, hardened, and some subconsciously try to become what they are perceived to be true. Because I ain't gonna lie, back in the day, I'm like, oh, you gonna say I'm this? Okay, well, I'm gonna make sure you ain't a liar. I'm gonna make a truth teller out of you.
Like, okay, that's how you want to see me? Bet. You know what I mean?
Wait until after school. For my next,
what your intention was, but that's how it comes off.
After school detention was regular for me in elementary.
Oh, not me. Not me.
Oh no, I was always in trouble in elementary school. I grew a little bit out of it, but I stayed in some of it. So for my next question I have for you, why does this perceived threat, in your opinion, not extend to non-minority children? Because I feel like the threat is perceived, like you said with your son earlier. They can be at the skate park. He and his Caucasian friend could be at the skate park skating, and his Caucasian friend can get an attitude, and he can be respectful. And in both scenarios, it's almost like, well, the expectation is switched, that he's going to be the disrespectful one and the Caucasian kid is going to be polite and courteous. And yes, sir, right away, sir. Why do you think that perceived threat is not extended to the Caucasian, like Caucasian males and females?
I don't think it ever has been. I think that's the problem. It never really has been. The only time we see them in that light is when we watch slavery movies and we feel like, oh my gosh, they were so horrible. How could they have done that? When we think of like genocide or things like that, that's the only time they're perceived as that way. But generalizing them, it's not there. They have this sense of entitlement, like, oh, that was just our ancestors. That's not us. So we can never come off that way. We can be as angry. They can say whatever they want, but it's like you look at our presidency. When Trump says all these ridiculous things and you're a Trump supporter, oh, well, I'm sorry. I just don't agree with him. He can say all these things, but if Barack ever said one of the things he had ever said, it comes off in a completely different light. Like we always have to be 10 times like more innocent before we can be perceived as non-threatening, unfortunately. But I feel like they have this sense of entitlement and that they feel like they can do it, but they don't. Like they're not conscious of it at the same time. They don't realize it themselves until it's pointed out. Like you can have a conversation with you from like, I've never viewed it that way. Right. Because you've never really had to.
I think that they are aware and I would go as far as to say conscious of it. You could just look historically. You can look historically and see like slavery. You can look historically even further and see the Crusades. You can look even further and see the pillaging that Vikings did. Like you can look back historically and see these are not cool things that were done in historical periods. And yes, it's easy to say, oh, well, those were my ancestors. Those were, those people weren't me. But then you can fast forward today and see tons of different types of video content where the thought process of the ancestors of being superior are still prevalent today. And I actually had a really good interaction with it was a very brief interaction with a little Caucasian boy. I think he was Caucasian. He could have been something else, but he had very fair skin. We'll just call him that. And I was just walking out of the store. We had no reason to interact whatsoever. And he was like, hello, sir. How was your day today? And it was like late at night. I was like, I'm good. Thank you for asking, young man. I appreciate that. Are you having a good day? And we had this very small interaction. And for him, I'm sure he's probably not gotten to the place of, to me at least, it's apparent he hasn't gotten to the place where he's making a choice on, oh, am I privileged? Am I not privileged? Now, will he have certain privileges because of what he looks like? Absolutely. People who say that there's no such thing as privilege, I don't understand that, because I'm privileged to be able to walk in my neighborhood as a Black male and nobody really questions me because I'm from that neighborhood. And so that is a privilege that I have. Now, if you're not from that neighborhood and you come walking through and you look suspect, somebody's probably going to mess with you because you're not privileged. So privilege exists in multiple facets depending on where you're at. But this systematic privilege does exist, I believe, on a much greater scale than my ability to walk through my neighborhood, because I've also been walking through suburbs where I've been stopped by the security, the local security. Who are you here to see? What are you here? What are you doing here? Why is your car? Like, why are you asking me so many questions about my business? And so, right, where's your real car at? Because this isn't your car. This has a name on the side of it. So I'm sorry, I kind of strayed a little bit, but I also want to ask you, because this is my perception. If you don't agree with this perception, then let me know. But my perception is that the Caucasian, whether male or female, has found a way to better distance themselves from not stereotypical information, from actual documented historical information.
It's not taught in the school. You know it's not.
Well, it's definitely downplayed in the school. It's
highly downplayed. We get 1 month, and all they talk about is Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. They don't talk about Malcolm X. They don't talk about anybody else. They don't talk about like our artists and people who had all these movements. They don't talk about any of those things. It's very basic. We all know about Martin Luther King because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Like, that's it. They don't have all these other stories. They touch on it very briefly. And when they talk, they actually can say the word. I don't even like to say it, but they can say the word like nigga in a book, and everybody will look at my kid and my kid feels uncomfortable. So like, it's in their literature. They can actually say it. You can't say cunt, or you can't say all those other words, you know what I mean? Like, that are degrading to other races, but you can say that in a classroom because it's in the literature. But yet, if you say it about the Jews or any other race, you're being distasteful. It's that's a whole nother topic.
So Brian says something here that I want to ask your opinion on, because he says we have to become damn near passive or subservient not to be presumed as a threat. There's another side to that happens as well, because I think sometimes what happens in the Black community, they say, how many marches are you going to do? How many protests are you going to do? How many boycotts are you going to do? And there becomes a side that is militant. That's like, no, when you going to pick up your guns and when we going to start the real fight? And so that side perceives the passiveness and the subservient nature of trying to work within the system as really selling out to the cause to better your conditions for your people.
Yes.
Oh no, they definitely don't talk about Nat Turner, cousin. So in your opinion, because I do think there has to be balance. Like, I'm not you punch me in the face 7 times and I turn the other cheek. You swing at me and miss, you catching hands. So
I'm a little nicer. I can be that passive aggressive, but it'll come out. It will come out. Like, it'll come out in a different way. Like, oh, okay, you may not get me today, but when you need me.
Right.
That one guy over the phone who he was called I'm
above that now.
Yeah, I'm above that now. It's above me now. I love how he handled that. Like, no, now you want my help.
Right.
Who was I before to you? Oh, okay. No, it's okay. It's above me now.
Yeah, it's above me because I'm a different person now. I did like the way he actually handled that. I think that was in my own notes of creating this content and creating the questions was, being able to say, you know what, the power you thought you had, and now that you found out that you don't have it, and now that you need me or you need something, I ain't got nothing for you. Sorry, I can't help you. Like he said, it's above me now. It's beyond me now to help you. And it sucks because it's like, in many ways, I want to try to understand people. I want to try to understand the people that I agree with, and I want to try to understand people that I disagree with. But when you begin to attack me in ways that you think are going to be hurtful to me, because you can call me whatever you want to call me until you, again, swing at me and miss, I'll be everything you say I am. I'll be everything you say I am. And that sounds great. I'll be whatever it is. But until you physically come over here, and sometimes, when I was younger, I would invite people, you're saying a whole lot of things. However, you have yet to make progress over to my physical being. So those words, the sound waves are getting to me, but you're letting me know that you're really not about an action that you want to take. So let's go ahead and stop talking, because I'm not going to come over there and punch you for the words that you're allowed to say. So I don't know, but I wondered what your thought process was on how minorities are perceived as a threat. And for some reason, the non-minority has been able to distance itself from being a threat, even though when historically the role has absolutely been reversed. Not to say that minorities in their own empires back in the day didn't have their own violence and didn't have their own slaves. There was definitely some stuff like that going on as well. However, when we look at just the most recent history, where those empires are not necessarily in existence any longer, and the American nation that has been founded out of, Civil War and revolution, it's like, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to how revolutions spark and what causes that, but it typically is when a minority is discounted and not given representation and basically treated like crap. After a while, they have this breaking point and they say, okay, we've allowed revolution. So let's move on, because we are at an hour and 5 minutes. That hour went by super fast, and I don't want it to be 2 hours that goes by super fast. So I'm going to move on to my next question. Do you feel that this perception, and you said there was a difference in the beginning between your sons and your daughters, and your sons and your daughter, but do you feel the perception of threat is the same when it comes to your sons and your daughter, or do you feel like she is less perceived as a threat because she's a woman or a young lady or a young girl? I don't know how old she is. But do you feel like she gets a little bit more, I guess her threat level is a little less because she is a female versus being a young minority male?
I feel like it is, unfortunately. I feel like a part of it is, but I also feel like she's in a little bit more danger when she's out and about, because a man might want to say a little bit more to her in a disrespectful way, because I know I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that where they feel like they could just say some of the most disgusting things to you, and you're supposed to just be okay with that. And if you say something back, then, oh, it's a problem. But you completely invaded my whole space, how I feel, my comfort zone, by saying these degrading things, and you feel like it's okay. Like she has a different danger, a different threat to her than they do, I would say within like the sexual nature, because I've had that where I've just been running with my sister in our neighborhood, and a man, these gentlemen, a group of Caucasian men, basically said some very degrading things to us. And if we just, we calmly just walked away and tried to take a different route, and they continued to follow us. That was a very difficult situation to be in. We couldn't do anything. And if I was to react in an angry way, they could have cut out the car. They could have dragged us into the car. You know what I mean? Like different scenarios. That's for her. That's the type of danger I see for her, as opposed to my boys. Because I've been followed in a car, in my own vehicle, where they literally saw me and were following me in my vehicle, and I pulled into a police station because I was scared. And it was just because, usually you can tell, I felt more comfortable telling someone of the same race, like, no, I'm not interested, or please stop, than I did telling them. Because I felt more danger would come to me if I said something.
Well, I think that's interesting, because it goes back to when you're perceived to be in any category. It doesn't matter, threat, hostile, friendly, foe, whatever it may be. People who are also in the same perception of your category, you're more comfortable with. So it makes sense that if you're approached by an African American male or Latino American male, to be able to say, hey, I'm not interested, and feel like that respect of your lack of interest in their pursuit would be respected, because we all know what we all got to go through anyway. So it's like, let's not cause a scene that caused law enforcement to come around, and now we're both in danger because one of us is acting like we ain't got no common sense.
Exactly.
Whereas somebody who is as a majority feels like, well, every woman should be breaking their neck to be with me because I'm the superior race, which is, we're going to go on race in a whole nother conversation, but I am the superior race. We'll use that word loosely in these parts. And everybody wants to be with the king. Everybody wants to be with the dominant male. I do think that some of the language we are beginning to use within our own circles is helping to strengthen the confidence that we are not the perceived threat, that we are not the monsters or the animals or the predators or the super predators, because predator is not enough. Yeah, you can't just be a predator, you gotta be a super predator. That we are not those things, and really starting to build up again that confidence on not only who we are, but who we also want to be. Because I don't think that I don't think that anybody is fully arrived at, oh, you are the best of what you can possibly be. You don't need to get anything else. This is the prime spot for you. I think that we're all striving to be something better, or we at least should be striving to be something better. And as we continue to build that up within our language with each other and how we respect each other in the language that we use with each other, I think that will be something that will continue to, going back to another question, but continue to distance us from that perception. Because at some point, if somebody's perception of you is based on their own hallucinations, that's just called a hallucination of grandeur or something like that. Like, that's their own fairy tale. And so I'm not here to change anybody's fairy tale, but for those who are really open to experiences and open to engaging with different cultures and diversity, then yeah, we can have conversations and really find out like why I would be upset about certain things taking place, and be vocal about the things that I see are taking place. The next question I want to ask for you is, when do you think, as a society, not we as a people or them as a people, not the us versus them, but when do you think we as a society, collective group of people, will begin to move away from this perception of threat? And also secondary, does teaching our children about this perceived threat continue to perpetuate the cycle of the issue itself?
You know what? I struggle with that because I know within my own family, I tend to talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
I know the way my sister raises her kids, she does not bring that up to them at all. She's just like, I want them to just, as if they'll learn when it happens to them. And I just want my kids to be prepared.
It's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, because it's like they live in an area where it's like everybody knows who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So they're family that everybody knows who they are, and they're great kids. They're happy. They always view them in a positive light. They view my sister in a positive light, her husband and her kids in a positive light. They don't see them as a threat. So being everywhere where they know, it's like my worry is when they go to an area where they don't know them. So it's like, I just want my kids to be prepared. Yes, I know that I'm front loading them. I'm giving them this idea, but my kids also know that. Who cares how people look at you? Know who you are, first and foremost. Right. Know who you are. Know that could be a possibility. So just be aware of your surroundings. Like they always tell women, be aware of your surroundings. Just don't have your headphones in walking to your car. Be aware of where you are, because it could put you in a dangerous situation. Know how to react. Know how to behave. Know how to conduct yourself. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to go jogging in the middle of the night at midnight.
When it's cool outside.
Is it really safe? No, it's not. That's not the best time for me to go jogging, even though it's something, it might work with what I have going on. Oh, this is a great time to go. But am I putting myself in a safe situation? That's what it comes down to. So, yes, I may be giving them a little bit more, but I'm also preparing them for something that can happen. If it doesn't happen, even better. You know what I mean? Like, even better, because guess what? I don't want you to be like, oh gosh, there's a police officer. Oh, freeze up. You know what I mean? I want you to be like, okay, yes, be calm about it. Know how to conduct yourself and understand, like, okay, if I give an attitude, guess what? It might not go so well for me, but
I might get an attitude.
if I, like, you know, bite my tongue a little bit and be like, okay, yes, I see your point, and I, you know, and I tone it down, it might go a little bit better for me. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately. I'm just preparing them, whether it happens or not. We take self-defensive classes, right? It may not ever happen, but you're prepared.
Right, but you got a karate chop waiting just to just in case.
This world can be as dangerous and scary as you make it.
Right.
You can't be in this bubble. You can't be in this happy bubble. Yes, you can. Something can happen to you, and your reaction is how it determines your day. Man, that happened to me. But you know what? I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I still have, at the end of the day, I still got my bed. I got my family. I'm good. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just, that's another perception that we have to deal with.
Okay.
It's all about how we react to it.
Yeah. And from the perspective of moving away from it, I think education is important. Like you said, we live in a society where we have car insurance just in case we get in an accident. We you get life insurance policies, and it's a guarantee you're going to die. So like we have all these different things that we do just in case. You know, the rainy day, save money for a rainy day in case you need it. All these different things, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to educating our children on potential circumstances that they can find themselves in, because not only has it happened, but it probably will happen again in this lifetime of mine. I just feel like it. I feel like it's almost like trying to tell somebody, well, you shouldn't teach your kids to look both ways to see if cars are coming before they cross the street, because obviously there's times where cars are not coming. I'm sorry. Well, in the event a car is coming, I want them to understand that they need to stop, look, and listen before they put their foot in the street. And I've taught my kids quite frankly, like, you don't know if the person behind the wheel likes you or not. So don't just step in front of their car with some sense of entitlement. Well, I'm the pedestrian and I have the right of way. I love what California has going on with, hey, pedestrian, you don't wear any armor. If you get in between this car and you have the right of way, but they don't care about that right of way, you're going to lose.
But do you have a life insurance policy? Are you prepared?
Right. But are you prepared to lose? Because you might lose in a major way. Let me bring in what Brian said, because I did ask him about his thoughts about girls being a less of a threat, because he has a couple of daughters as well, my little baby cousins. He says, I feel like my girls are perceived as less of a threat than my sons, but that is changing. However, I agree with Kristin that in society at large, they are less of a threat, but subject to be victimized, more of a subject to have an act of violence or disrespect perpetrated upon them. I agree with both of you guys there. I only have goddaughters, and that is my concern with them. My concern is some guy gonna, think she wants to fight him or think she wants to rob him. That's why guys typically get robbed by women, because they're like, she would never rob me. And then you wake up with your kidneys missing. So, I got a couple more questions.
I was not ready for that one. I was not ready for that at all.
This is one of the stories that was shared with me. So I'm always like, yeah, no, I've never been into extracurricular activities when it comes to women like that. I'm cool, because I'm not interested in my kidneys missing. I'll take my chances with my mouthpiece. Thank you. The next question that I want to ask, and we're coming towards the end of the Intersation. So for those who are watching live, if there's a key takeaway that you're taking away from tonight's conversation, please feel free to drop it in. If there's a takeaway that you want us to take away that you have that you want to share, please drop it in the live chat so we can bring that into the conversation before we wrap. But my question goes back to like the beginning of our conversation about having a child who has an identity and trying to tell them the construct of which society they're going to interact with. How do you encourage them to work to change the perception of being a threat, while still remaining authentic to themselves, still being able to have feelings that are valid and experience, that they're not just like, oh, well, I can't shed this experience or share this experience or this emotion because of the perceived threat that I am. How do you encourage that and allow them to function within limits, but not limit their greatness?
My kids are very opinionated, unfortunately, and fortunately. I think it's just naturally embedded into them because their mother always wants to speak up for herself.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this sense of entitlement to speak up. I think it's just this generation in general has this entitlement to speak up for themselves. They do it a lot within. I mean, social media has its good and bad parts, but they speak up for themselves. They're like, hey, this is what we believe in, and they fight for it. So I think that's where their extra confidence comes from when it comes to that. Or even though I try to like downtone some of the things that they do, they still go and do it anyway. You know, so it's given, they have that outlet now. They have more of an outlet as opposed to when we were younger. It was just the group of people that you talk to around your neighborhood. You're able to share those experiences with them, and unfortunately, you guys had a lot of the same situations, and
Right.
you felt the same unfairness and things like that, where they're able to reach out to a broader network of people who maybe it's not like that in their neighborhood, and they have other experiences they can share with other people. So me trying to give them as much information as I can and them still being able to be themselves, they have an outlet. So I feel like that's how they're able to do that. That's how they have that balance.
And so I think that outlet is very important to give them. At least it's almost like, if you're going to take away something, what are you willing to give? Like, and in this case, if you're going to take away being able to 100% be you in every situation in society, what space are you going to give them where they can still be 100% be themselves?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important. My second to last question, because you already know what the other question is going to be, so don't act surprised. It's the last
I don't
question.
know what it is. I'm gonna be surprised.
It's okay. It's the last question I always ask. But my second to last question is, some of the perceived threats, some of the perception of threat has been self-inflicted. Not self-inflicted in the sense of you and I caused this perceived threat, but the people who came before us may have caused some of the perceived threat. Not all of it, but some of it. In what ways, for us being the older generation now, as our children are the upcoming generation, in what ways can we hold ourselves accountable to work to eradicate this threat to our children and hopefully our grandchildren?
I think with knowledge is power, and equipping them with how to handle themselves, because a lot of it we weren't given. We weren't really given. It's just like that. A lot of things are just suppressed. You're like, oh no, you just don't do that. You just don't do that. Well, our generation is like, why? Why don't we do that? How can we
Right.
prevent these situations? We're more about preventative measures and making sure that these things don't happen again than our generation was. It was just like, well, you just don't do that. Well, you
Right.
should know.
Because I said so.
Yeah, because I said so. Well, why? It's like, what's the meaning behind it? If we continue to educate and give a reasoning, and maybe they'll have a better understanding, be like, okay, maybe there won't be so much like them fighting back on us. Like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, here's the thing. Kids are always going to fight us in whatever they want to do, because that's what kids do. That's what we did. That's what you did. You know what I mean? Oh, you told me I can't do it, or I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
But if they
They'll
have,
tell you.
yeah, if like, what can you teach me? Oh, it was different in your time. Like, no, in actuality, it really wasn't. You're just exposed to a little bit more than we were because you have a bigger outlet. That's the only difference. That is the only difference. You know what's happening in so-and-so's neighborhood 80 miles away. But
Right.
when you're because you have that outlet. We didn't have that outlet. We just knew what was happening 2 blocks away, you know? So it's I feel like educating them and giving them an outlet, giving them an opportunity to talk about it, and then within themselves come together and have these broader conversations with other groups of people. That way, everybody has a better understanding. I feel like this generation is more into understanding than generations before us.
You know, that's interesting. I don't know if you ever seen that video. I forget what therapist this was, but it was I think she was a Caucasian therapist. I'm not sure, but she did that focus group where she had a couple of different nationalities within the focus group, and basically, like, she would like say, hey, you know, black person, you move to the front of the room and you sit there, and there'll be like a white lady there, and she'll be like, I don't want to give up my seat. I don't want to move. I'm comfortable where I'm at. This is where I want to sit. She's like, you go to the back of the room. That's where you go. And what she was doing was basically showing, like, this is what racism, this is what prejudice does when you're allowing somebody to do things that we all in this room know is wrong. We all know this is wrong. Like, for somebody to be sitting in a seat, and just because somebody is a different color, for them to be able to have that seat. We all know that that's wrong. However, because the majority of the people were the color of the person who would get the seat, whatever, you know, it's just the way things are. But then when it's turned and when it's flipped, then it's reverse racism. When there's affirmative action, it's reverse racism. Yeah. Well, what do you mean I can't get access to these jobs because I'm not the minority, I'm the majority? And so now you're discriminating against me and my rights to pursue happiness, peace, and love, and all the other things that we should have as human rights. Well, but when it was in your advantage, you didn't speak out against this. So help me understand that. I can't remember I have to look up what this lady is. I'm going to send it to you via message.
Send it to me. I would love to see
because it was very interesting to see how the benefits of having a privilege superseded the willingness to stand up against what was right or wrong. Like, the benefits of me drinking hot water out of the colored only water fountain because you got cold water from the whites only fountain, that didn't bother you. But now that there's, you know, a fountain that's cool for me to drink from, that's cool water, and you got to drink hot water, you got a problem with that. I just thought that was a very interesting documentary. I think you'll be interested, and we'll have to have some offline conversations about it. But I'm going to move on to my last question after I bring in what Brian said in the chat. It says, I empower my girls to always have a voice. In my house, kids are to be heard. And when we ask them a ton of questions, and some aren't comfortable, but they are necessary in today's society. It's hard, especially when you know where we grew up at. It was like, I wish you would say something back. I remember one time my father was like scolding me. It was because my room was dirty, and he was like, oh, your room is a mess, and I'm tired of your room, blah, 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 blah. And I just remember, I don't remember how old I was, but I remember telling him, I don't like your attitude, and I don't like the way you're talking. And
how did that work out for you?
Well, here's the thing. Miraculously, I was still conscious. But it was such a different expectation for a child to speak out in that manner, because it wasn't like I was like, I don't like your damn attitude, and who you talking to? It was like, no, I was like, I don't like your attitude, and I don't like the way you're talking to me. And I was just stone cold faced with it. But all the conversations on the phone, my mother was on the phone downstairs, and I could hear her through my room wall, and my sister was on the phone in her room across the hallway. And I just remember the house went silent. Like, I can only imagine my mom was like, I gotta go because my son's about to die. And
let you go.
My sister was just like, did he just say that? Like, dang. But then my father, we had a long conversation about a lot of the things he didn't like about me. And so that was the last time I had that.
He got good. He got you good.
Yeah, that boldness of, well, I don't like how you're talking to me and this, but because then it was like, and I don't like. I think it was like 30 minutes of I don't like.
Because that's why I'm over here telling you in the first place.
Right. I don't like how you keep in this room in my house. But overall, it was such a different dynamic, especially the era we grew up in, because it was do as you're told, do as I say, not as I do, because I said so. Don't ask me no questions. Don't ask me where I'm going. I'm going to be where I'm at. I'm coming back when I come back. We go into the store. Don't touch nothing. Like, there was so many rules laid out.
But we knew those rules. Like, we knew them. And we may have tried to defy them a lot, but not as much as we really wanted to, because we were like, I'm not trying to go that other way. I'm not trying to receive that backhand. But I feel like my kids, I can give them that boundary, and sometimes they'll be like, mom means business, or they want to test that boundary just a little bit more. Like, I noticed though, now that my son was like, when he was turning into his like teenage years, those conversations seemed to go a little bit longer. And I was like, dude, I just told you no. There is no reasoning. There is no rhyme to it. Just do as you're told. End of story. Well, mother, I don't feel like. I was like, oh, now you want to hit me with the old mother, I don't feel like, or this should be going this way. Like, I don't knock it when my kid literally tells me like the truth, and I'll just sit there like, dang, that was clever. That was clever as hell. Like, you got a point there. You go ahead with yourself. I will give them credit when it's due. But if you're going to be respectful, I shut it down. Like, no, I'm done. For this conversation, I have to end the conversation, because it could go on longer than our Intersation sometimes, where we're just like, it's a good conversation. No, it's like beating the same drum over and over again. So yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, we are now at 1 hour and 30 minutes, so I'm going to ask you.
Good for us. This is good. This is good.
Therapeutic. I'm going to ask you my last question. As always, with every Intersation, I end with the same question. I start with the same question. I end with the same question. Same 2 different questions. But for you, if we have people that are watching live. For those who are watching live, or for maybe those who will be watching in the replay later on at another date, if you were to give them 2 or 3 different takeaways that you would want them to take away from tonight's conversation, what would those main takeaways be?
Let's not be naive to the fact that things are happening, and we do have to prepare our children. Yes, it's not the end of the world. We don't want our children to live in fear, but equip them with at least the knowledge that they can protect themselves. You know me, I always feel like knowledge is key. Knowledge always works. I feel like I always say knowledge.
Knowledge is important. Application of knowledge is power. Yes. So that's it? That's the takeaway? Just one takeaway?
Takeaway.
All right.
Love yourself.
Love you.
Home safely. That's what matters. I just want my babies to come home at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how the world perceives you. Know who you are, but know how to conduct yourself.
Yeah, that love yourself enough to swallow your pride and get yourself back to where you want to be safely. Exactly. And you know, it's funny because in all of the perception of threat, what typically tips the scale is when you start buying into that story and applying it because you don't like the way that perceived threat made you feel. And so your ego gets in and you say, oh, so this is how you going to see me. And I mean, transparency, I've been in plenty of fights because of that, where, oh, you perceive me. Sometimes it's not being perceived as a threat. Oh, you perceive that I'm a punk because I speak well. Okay, well, come over here and let me change your life really quick. And you'll, from this day forth, perceive people who speak well as dangerous weapons of mass destruction that will whoop the brakes off of you if the situation calls for that. Like,
do you remember that part in When They See Us where the guy's always singing? And then he's like, why are you always singing? I was like, I probably don't want to mess with that one.
Right? Leave alone. I have plenty of friends who I would like, hey, you might want to leave him alone. He's my friend for a reason because he's too dangerous not to be my friend. So I befriended him intentionally because I'm not interested in having to fight him later.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate you bringing this topic to the light. There is an Intersation panel that I want to do on When They See Us, or maybe it'll be just a simple what's going on segment. But there is one that I want to do that on that, and I would love to have you on that particular panel. But I appreciate you with everything that's going on in life, taking the time to come and sit on the first row, keeping your commitment, and just really just vibing and getting a good conversation going. So that way we could share and shed some light on this topic and hopefully compile some solutions for people that are looking for solutions. So I thank you again for your time. As I always say, hats off to you for sharing some insights. And one thing that I do want to say, before I move on to the last part of the Intersation is not simply sharing your insights, but sharing them in a calm and clear and concise manner. Because a lot of times people assume or perceive that because you're having these conversations, they're going to be overly emotional and supercharged with hate or supercharged with frustrations. Not to say that we don't have frustrations. However, the calmness of this conversation, the calmness of the pace of the conversation, I've rather enjoyed that tonight. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Me too.
All right. So as for the rest of the Intersation, as always within every Intersation, I like to end with a portion called Tools for the First Row. So where I got the name First Row from is a play on my last name. My last name is W-R-O-E, Row. But the first row, came from a lesson that I was taught by a mentor at a very early age. I was taught that simply the people who sit on the first row, they make two things. They make the most money and they get the most information because they are unencumbered by any distractions between them and the person who is presenting the information. So first row was birthed by that particular concept. Even deeper into how we got to Intersations and Wednesday words was simply this perception of threat. And that is one of the things that has resonated with me about this topic from the very beginning. This particular network and this type of growth and this type of sharing of stories was really birthed out of an experience of me interacting with a young African-American male who was demonstrating the characteristics of the perception of the threat that young African-American males are. And there's a Wednesday word called being a father to the fatherless, I think is the first Wednesday word that I did. And so if you're interested in seeing kind of like the genesis of this channel and its content and then how it all ties into this particular topic, I would definitely recommend checking that out. Being a father to the fatherless. It's a Wednesday word. It should be in the Wednesday word playlist under first row. So with the first row though, however, I have a segment at the end of every Intersation called Tools for the First Row. Because you're on the first row, because you've sat with us, whether live or via the replay, I want to provide a couple of tools, 3 tools. I've narrowed it down to 3 tools out of the tons of tools that I come up with. I narrowed it down to the top 3 tools that I thought were really important when dealing with the perception of being a threat as a minority child and or as a minority male or female. And so I want to share those tools with you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap for the night. The very first tool that I came up with when it came to the perceived threat was ignorance does not make perception better. And so I intentionally asked you that question tonight because I was wondering if that tool was simply just how I perceive it, or if really that is a substantial tool that we really have to engage with this perceived threat. It's not something that we're going to be able to ignore away. And ignoring it or not teaching the issue makes it where it's harder to actually address the issue. You cannot be intentional about change if you do not know what it is you are trying to change. You can accidentally change some things. You can be a good person and show some things and maybe promote change from that perspective. But in order to really be focused and intentional about the changes that you want to bring to the world in the short time that we have here in the grand picture, you have to know what the issue is. And so that's why the first tool is ignorance does not make perception better. It actually puts us in dangerous positions, because when we don't have the information and we find ourselves in situations, we typically lack the situational awareness necessary to keep ourselves out of trouble or move ourselves away from harm. So that is the very first tool that I came up with, is really ignorance does not make the perception better. And not only does it make the perception better, it doesn't allow you to identify the issue to address in the first place that needs to be changed. The second tool that I came up with is a tool that, when it comes to addressing being a perceived threat, it's a tool that I try to teach all my godchildren, my children, any children that I interact with. And actually, this is something that I seen online, but it was something that I interacted with well before I seen it online, with the guy who was saying it's above me now. Is that what he says? It's above me. Okay, so
it's like it's called, he puts his hands up.
Yeah, it's above me now. It's out of my hands. It's above me now. But it's confused the stereotype. When somebody perceives you as something because of stereotypical information, media information, any information or experiences that they had that were not with you, confuse the hell out of them. Confuse them by being the exact opposite of what they thought you were going to be, because they were all in. They were all invested in the perspective that you were going to be disrespectful, in the perspective that you're going to be non-compliant, in the perspective that you were not going to hire a lawyer to fight this at a later date. They're all invested in these different things. So when you confuse the stereotype, what it does is it, unfortunately for them, jars people awake. That lack of consciousness, that lack of awareness gets jarred into being awake. So I was just watching today a video of the law enforcement in Phoenix, I think it was, that drew guns on a family because of a shoplifting incident, or a shoplifting crime. We could call it a crime, incident, whatever. A doll was stolen from the dollar store, and for some reason the cops thought the best thing to do would be is to draw guns on a car full of adults and a couple of their children. And in the chaos, I'm going to say, it is apparent that the law enforcement agents perceived them as a threat before it almost perceived them as a threat before they even got there. Because I was like, wait a minute, why is all this yelling taking place? And why are guns drawn? Like, what did they steal? Was it armed robbery of a dollar store doll? Because why are they drawing guns on this car? But it's because there's a perception of a threat. So be the exact opposite of what that you think that threat is going to be. Be the opposite of it and confuse law enforcement, not by, like you said, oh, well, I got my hands up, get the door. Let me explain to you why I'm not being compliant and getting the door. I want you to be able to see my hands so that we are both safe. Does that make sense to you? Don't go, oh, well, I'm trying to. No. In a calm, concise voice, I would love to open my door, but I'm not going to open my door right now because that would jeopardize your safety and my safety. And I don't want to be, you have a gun to my head. I don't want to be shot today. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you don't want to shoot anybody. Confuse them. So that is the second tool, is when people approach you using stereotypical information, make sure that you confuse that stereotypical information by being the exact opposite. And that is something that when it comes to that ignorance, if you can teach what the stereotypical information is, then your children know how or what the opposite of that is, because you can also teach that as well. And then the third and the final tool, really when it comes to perceived threats, and I was torn because I only want to do three tools going forward. I was torn between mentorship, and I was torn between really taking the ownership of clearing that threat in the older generations And what I went with was really mentorship. And the reason why I chose to go with mentorship is because there is a positive and a negative mentor for everything in life that you want to do. If you want to be in the drug game, there's a negative mentor for that. If you want to be in law enforcement, there's a positive mentor for that. There's a positive and negative mentor, and these mentor relationships that are in place, they act as guides. And not only do they act as guides, they also act as examples that are going to promote one stereotype over the other. So mentorship was the third tool that I came up with, is about being a mentor to the younger generation, the people who are looking up to you. If I seen this when I was in my son's my oldest son's sixth grade class, I sat and we were listening to the information about what was coming in the coming school year for the sixth graders and all these different things. And as I sat there in like open house, I think it was, I was literally watching parents who couldn't simply be quiet and pay attention to the teacher who was giving instructions. And when I came and I had to sit in the class with my son one day, it was no surprise to me that there were students sitting in the class who couldn't pay attention and were talking and wouldn't listen to the teacher because of the example that their parents may be setting for them in the household and or in the school at the same time. So mentorship is very important when it comes to attacking and eradicating the perceived threat that my minority son and your minority sons and daughter may be or are perceived to be. Mentorship is very important in that because, as you said yourself, oh, well, you know, they come from a single family household. They come from a broken household. And it's like, well, no, I'm going to be the mentor regardless of whether they come from a single family, a shared family, a mixed family, whatever family they come from. We're going to set the example. And that is one of the things that I try to instill in my children. Look, when I walk out the door, I represent you and I represent me. When you walk out the door, you represent us and you represent yourself. Make sure that you're representing us well. So mentorship is very important. So really quick, the 3 tools that I shared are, number 1, ignorance doesn't make perception better. You can't ignore something like this away. Number 2, confuse the stereotype. Use that as a tactic whenever there's going to be a stereotype that you feel is going to be used against you and you feel like there's an opportunity for you to perpetuate it. Confuse it. Go exactly the opposite, counterintuitive to it. And then number 3, mentorship. Take the time to be the positive mentor that is going to begin to erode at the foundation of these perceived threats. Other than that, that's all I got for you guys tonight. I'm glad you guys tuned in with us live. For those who are watching live, thank you for contributing, Cousin Brian, to the conversation. For those who are watching via the replay, if you would like to contribute to the conversation, please leave us a comment. We will engage with you up until the first 7 days of the content being released. After that, we move on to the next thing. Speaking of the next live content that we have coming on the first row, the next live content will be tomorrow. It will be the Wednesday word, and that Wednesday word is on mobility. That is June 19th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Other than that, this is one of the topics that came in from topics@firstrow.com. So if you have a topic that you would like to hear or like us to explore, please feel free to reach out to us via email. I'm actually working on something that maybe I'll be able to share next week once I get the bugs worked out of it. But reach out to us via email so you could share a topic that you want us to address, and we'll get that topic on the roster if it's something that we feel like will help us all grow. So other than that, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. As always, please remember to subscribe to the First Row. That's 1STWROE. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. You can also find us anywhere almost on social media. LinkedIn, I almost said Netflix. That was weird. Maybe we got something coming on Netflix soon. Check it out. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us at firstrow.com. But I look forward to the next one that we can get engaged with on, Kristin. I look forward to the next time you as viewers watching live, even as the replay, that you guys can engage with the content. Until the next time, if you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. We are happy to engage with you in any of our platforms. Until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless.